annual Forward Together celebration. My name is Susan Adams, and I'm honored to be the Secretary and Action Chair of the League of Women Voters of Beloit. We have needed to hold our event virtually for the last few years instead of having a luncheon. And this year, with the February weather being unpredictable, we're glad that we're meeting virtually again. Of course, today it's beautiful, but eventually we may need to meet in a warmer month to ensure that we can all attend an in-person event. First, there's a few housekeeping details. This event is being conducted on Zoom video conferencing. It's being recorded for later viewing, and to keep background noise to a minimum, we've muted everybody in the audience. And we ask that you please keep yourselves muted unless you're invited to speak. So in a few minutes, we're going to ask audience members who hold or who are running for public office to introduce themselves. At that time, we're going to ask them to unmute until they've introduced themselves. And to see them better, you might want to look at the top right-hand corner where it says view, and then you can just view and hit, then there'll be a drop-down box that'll say speaker view. And then you can see just, the one person who's speaking at a time. So then you won't say, where are they? I don't see them on a different page or whatever. Okay. If you have any questions for the speaker when she starts speaking, we want you to please type your questions using the chat feature that you can click on at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to write questions as you think of them. We have league members who are monitoring the questions and comments, and we will direct the questions to our speaker in the Q&A session at the end. Well, this mid-February event began several years ago as a celebration of women and was held on or near the birthday of pioneer suffragist Susan B. Anthony. Coincidentally, the League of Women Voters was founded on February 14, 1920. So in 2020, the year that marked the centennial of the League of Women Voters and of the ratification of the 19th Amendment that allowed us all to vote, women to vote, the leagues decided to reorient our focus and make the event more of a celebration and rededication to the mission of the League of Women Voters, which is empowering voters, advancing democracy. And mindful of both leagues and Wisconsin's state motto, we renamed the event our annual Forward Together celebration. So this annual event's been a fundraiser for each of our leagues, and we hope you will remember us and consider making a donation to the leagues. The funds that are raised from this event will be shared equally by both leagues and will help us fulfill our mission. Now, Linda Reinhardt is going to tell us a little bit more about the League of Women Voters and the work that we do.
Well, good morning. I'm Linda Reinhardt, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Janesville. On behalf of the Janesville and Beloit Leagues, we thank you for your attendance today at our League of Women Voters Forward Together celebration. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization established in 1920 that advocates for the informed and active participation in government. Our members are women and men who work to improve our systems of government and impact public policies through education and advocacy. The League helps citizens register to vote, hosts candidate forums, studies local, state, and national issues, and brings informative programs like this to citizens in our area. The League neither supports nor opposes candidates for office at any level of government. At the end of today's celebration, we will give you more information about candidates forums and other events that the Beloit and Janesville Leagues will be holding this spring. I want to thank the members of the committee who put this event together. Susan Adams, who you've already met, Lisa Johnson, Barb Porter, Rich Harper, Betty Carr, and myself. We are fortunate enough to have several elected officials and candidates for office in attendance. I have a list of those who I believe are present. And if you are an office holder or a candidate, please unmute yourselves and I will call on you. And then when you're done, when you've had a chance to introduce yourself, you can go back to mute again. Please identify yourself in the office you hold or are seeking. No speeches, just introductions. And we want to start with our state senator, Wisconsin State Senator Mark Spreitzer, who represents us in the 15th District. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Spreitzer. I started as your state senator this January, covering parts of Rock, Greene, and Dane counties. Good to be with you.
Thank you, Mark. I know that Sherry Blakely is here. Sherry?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Can you see me on camera?
Yes.
Good. All right. I'm in my 6th year as a Beloit City Councilor, and I'm running for my 4th term for council in April. I'm glad to be here and happy you're holding the event.
Thank you, Sherry. Amy Levy.
Good morning, everyone. Amy Levy. I'm a current board member for the School District of Beloit Board of Education, and I'll be seeking re-election this spring.
Thank you, Amy. Greg Schneider.
Good morning, Greg Schneider, currently on the school board for the School District of Beloit.
And RJ Sutherland. RJ, I know you're here. I see you on the screen, your name on the screen.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we don't see you.
Oh, well, sorry about that. I'm a Rock County Supervisor, District 18, which is Janesville's 3rd and 4th ward and downtown. And I love your motto, forward, especially together. Thank you.
Thanks, RJ. Did I miss anybody? Any other candidate for? Oh, Lori Stotler is here. Lori.
Well, I'm not elected, but I'm happy to be the clerk treasurer for the area, and thanks for hosting today.
Okay, thank you. I guess I put you in the wrong category of elected officials, but thank you, Lori. Lori's also a member of the Janesville League of Women Voters, and we're happy to have her as a member. Did I miss any candidates for office or office holders? Great, great. All right. So would everyone please mute themselves if they haven't already? I think those are the notables that we want to recognize today. Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't sure anybody can hear us give them a round of applause, but thank you for serving. We appreciate it. We wouldn't be able to have a representative government if we didn't have people who are willing to run. So democracy can't work if people aren't going to run. So we thank the incumbents and the challengers for their willingness to put themselves through the rigors of campaigning for and then serving as in public office. Our government can't function without you. We also want to be certain to express special appreciation to County Clerk Lisa Tollefson and all municipal clerks, especially Lori, since she's here, and other elected election officials in our area who work so hard to make our elections fair and secure. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Judge Ashley Morse of the Rock County Circuit Court. Judge Morse was appointed to Rock County Circuit Court by Governor Evers in March of 22. She is the first woman of color to serve as a Rock County judge. So, yay. Morse is a Janesville resident and a graduate of the University of Wisconsin Law School. She'd worked for the Wisconsin State Public Defender's Office since 2010 before being appointed to Rock County Circuit Court. She's also served on the Rock County Trauma Task Force and the Rock County Youth Justice Racial Disparities Committee. And her presentation today is called When Race and Trauma Collide, the need for trauma-informed care for BIPOC youth. Remember, if you have questions for Judge Morse, you can type them into the chat area of the Zoom. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our distinguished guest, Judge Ashley Morse. And make sure you put up in your view, if you can go to your view, you can put it on speaker and then you can see just her in the in your what do I want to say, your screen. And she's going to be sharing some slides with us as well. So please join me in giving a warm welcome.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in on a beautiful Saturday. I'm gonna bear with me if I have any technical difficulties. We've been pretty much back to a lot of in-person court, so my Zoom skills are getting a bit rusty, but I'm gonna try to share my screen now. Okay. Oops, hold on a second. All right, there we go. There's the right one, I think. All right, so good morning. I'm happy to be here to talk to you guys today. This is an issue that I've been passionate about for some time. If any of you attended the Racial Trauma Summit that the Rock County Trauma Task Force put together last summer now, some of this might be repetitive information, but this is sort of a project that I became involved with in my years as a public defender representing people, both adults and kids throughout the state. We had a lot of training about trauma-informed care and the impact of trauma on youth, but there was sort of a gap, I think, in the research that really explained or articulated some of the unique experiences that both children and adults from minority populations were experiencing. This was something that I could deeply relate to in my experiences throughout my life. It was also something I saw in terms of the experiences of my coworkers. So if you are a person who's worked in child welfare, certain medical professions, nurses, I think law enforcement, your EMT, if you're a person who deals with people experiencing trauma on a regular basis, we, amongst the defense attorneys, they did a study measuring, they called it compassion fatigue, that sometimes just being in situations where you're constantly exposed to stress and things, even if it's not happening to you, it's happening to the people around you, that can have an effect on our well-being. It triggers our stress response cycle. It can cause, what we call burnout. And so I was kind of in an environment where a lot of these different things were happening and were at play. And so it was something I thought that, especially in the justice system, we could all benefit from learning a little bit more about. So kind of my introduction to trauma in the form of my work with children involved in the court system. So this could be children that were charged with crimes or things that would be crimes if they were adults. So children with delinquency actions pending, children that are in need of protection and services, children experiencing homelessness, neglect, abuse, things like that, that a lot of times people think as, public defenders, we just, appear with adults, but we do that representation really is more than just adult criminal work. We work with kids, we work with people who are experiencing mental health crises. And so a lot of the foundation that I had in terms of my training was around ACEs, what we call the adverse child experiences. And this idea that, when children experience trauma, especially in their formative years, that this can have long-term impacts on them. And that's definitely something that I saw in my work, in my experiences with people that ended up in the criminal justice system. A lot of my adult clients had significant trauma in their childhood, physical abuse, sexual abuse, children that grew up in the foster care system, experienced neglect, poverty, things like that, really didn't have the sort of maybe access to services or whatever, or didn't get into therapy. And so sometimes it's the when you're stressed and you experience trauma, your body tries to naturally cope with that. And so we try to do things to regulate ourselves, and sometimes without identifying those issues and getting the proper care, sometimes those coping skills that people develop to deal with those issues can be, kind of maladaptive, or things that aren't healthy for them. And so as when I work with adults, a lot of it is trying to, undo that and get people help. But it's more effective, I think, when we address these issues especially in children, as soon as possible. And so the idea behind this is sort of kind of expanding what we think about in terms of what might be a traumatic experience to a child of color. I'll say that I'll give a disclaimer that a lot of the slides relate to Black children, but this is not, a lot of these concepts are not exclusive to Black children. A lot of this similar research has been found in other minority populations, including Latinx children, Native American children. So really, like I said, although the slides focus on Black children, a lot of the times it's not an exclusive group. So the some of what I've talked about that you may be familiar with in terms of how these traumatic experiences might affect us. So the behavior, so lack of physical activity. Children with high ACE scores are more likely to smoke, drink alcohol, engage in drug use, less reliable, missing school, missing court, missing work. These are and so that's kind of like the behavioral part of it, how sometimes this trauma can manifest. But if any of you, you have your yearly physical or something, and the doctors always ask, how's your stress level? How's your stress level? What can we do to reduce your stress? Because it doesn't only affect our behaviors, there's a biological component to being exposed to constant stress. So it affects our health. You see higher rates of diabetes, obesity, heart disease, depression, engaging in, kind of higher risk behavior, more instances of suicide, sexually transmitted diseases, things like that, where it can really have the long-term impacts of these things can be quite significant. And so if you look at this picture, the above ground portion, I think is sort of the experiences that I think we can all kind of easily identify and relate to, and I see that as a traumatic event. And so, but it's the under the ground portion that I think that we need to, you know, pay more attention to and learn more about, because these are sometimes harder for us to recognize. So there's been a lot of new research about race-based trauma, and so that was really what the Trauma Summit focused on. And so there's a lot of, if any of you here have done, you know, training on social justice issues, you know, related to race and discrimination, you know, you might have heard things like implicit bias, microaggressions, you know, or even just, you know, instances of where people of color might experience physical violence that's based on their race. We saw kind of you know, I think for communities of color, you know, this isn't new information by any means. I think when you go back to especially instances of violence that are portrayed or experienced by people of color, you know, it's you know, there's a long-term, you know, historical context of that, you know, dating back from slavery to Jim Crow to lynching and, you know, police violence, you know, Emmett Till, Rodney King, you know, so these are, you know, that's something that's been part of the historical context for people of color for a long time. And so, but I think we really saw an expansion of this, you know, after the George Floyd murder. And I think something that really I became kind of hyper aware of during that time period was just the exposure to, you know, we're now in an online, you know, everybody's on the internet, kids are on the internet, especially, you know, during the pandemic, you know, kids report, you know, I think 45% of kids now report being on the internet like almost constantly. And so, you know, you can access anything on the internet. And so I think people are getting better now about, you know, being aware of the vicarious trauma that can occur from witnessing these events. And so you start to see more disclaim, you know, those trigger warnings that show up before videos saying, hey, you know, this is, you know, sensitive content, you know, sensitive or graphic content, you know, you might, you know, be aware of this because of the impacts. But really, it seemed like after that incident, there was kind of like this flood of videos on the internet of instances of violence against people of color, not just Black and brown individuals. We saw, you know, increased instances of violence against the Asian Pacific Islander community. And so you know, so that kind of got me thinking, you know, I was at home, you know, during the pandemic, isolated, spending a lot of time on the internet. And I just kept thinking, you know, as an adult, you know, who has all this knowledge, training, and experience, like how, and you know, it was a time where I was struggling to deal with some of these issues. I know a lot of my coworkers were struggling to deal with a lot of these issues. And so it made me think, you know, how are children in our community dealing with experiencing these issues? And so what we know is that, you know, instances of racial trauma that our Black, brown youth might experience really has the same effect as any other kind of trauma. And I think there's some research that says it's actually can have, you know, the effects can be almost more significant. So when you think of different types of, you know, on this graphic, you know, when we think about a racist event, like this is, this doesn't necessarily need to be a you know, an instance of violence, or like I said, it doesn't even necessarily have to happen to you. So when we think of this category of racist events that people might experience, like I said, it could be actual, you know, physical violence that somebody might experience. It could be in the form of the vicarious trauma that I talked about, you know, witnessing this either on TV or in your community, in your neighborhood, having a family member that might have experienced something like this. And even those little instances of, you know, microaggressions and things that can have a, we know that it's, you know, those are often not isolated incidences, and that can have a cumulative effect that again triggers the stress response cycle, and we see these same negative impacts that you would expect when we have children with a kind of traditional ACE experiences. So we see disrupted sleep, avoidance of certain things, and, you know, increased anxiety, depression. These are all, especially when you think about, you know, children, school-age children, you know, even experiencing sleep disruptions, hypervigilance. These are all, you know, not only affect their mental health, but it can also affect their performance in school. There's been studies done about, you know, children that, there was a study, I think, out of the DC area where they had interviewed some, I think it was like Black teenage boys aged 13 to 15. And in the Washington, DC area, you know, it was a predominantly Black community. And some of those children reported experiencing up to 5 microaggressions a day. And so if you think about, you know, and that, to me, that was a statistic that really, you know, I was like, wow, that that can really impact, you know, how you interact with the world, your confidence as you know, move through the world, your own, how you, like your feelings of really self-worth. I know, like for me, I had an experience when I was in high school, you know, I was at a football game. I grew up in a really small town, Prophetstown, Illinois, where I was really the only person of color in my school, in my community, outside of my siblings. And I remember being at a football game, you know, and that was like the thing to do in town. You know, on Friday nights, everybody's at the football game. And I had gotten into an argument with a classmate, you know, at this football game. And people that know me know that sometimes I have strong opinions about things, and I don't, I'm not always the quietest person in the group, but you know, we had this argument, and it sort of devolved into, I remember him saying, you know, at the, you know, his, you know, I think when he was running out of better things to say, you know, his, you know, his last line in the argument was, you know, well, at least I'm not Black, you know, and that was, you know, and so that was sort of I was really taken aback by that, you know, that it's, you know, it didn't matter, you know, how right my points were, you know, how well I did in school, how, you know, how good I was, that I never been in trouble, like this idea of, well, at least I'm not Black, you know, that this is a, you know, something that people perceive as a burden or something that I carry that I, you know, I may never overcome, you know, and it may not matter what I do, that this is still how people are going to perceive me. And just feeling very alone. And, you know, I don't think I've, you know, felt more othered, you know, in my life, or in this crowd of people, you know, I'm the only person of color. You know, these are my friends, my peers at school. And I had this like really sort of hurtful, embarrassing experience. And obviously I'm telling you guys about it now, so it stuck with me. and that wasn't a, you know, it wasn't an instance of physical violence or harm against me, but it really was something that, you know, whether I like to admit it or not, you know, did affect my confidence in how, you know, I moved through the world. I think sometimes some of these concepts I'll talk about as we move on, you know, I really related to, because I could see, you know, these are experiences that I've had myself. And I think at that time, you know, that was something I really struggled to talk to anybody about. You know, I grew up in a household where, you know, my mom's not a person of color, she's white, my grandparents are white, and really having, I had a hard time articulating that experience in a way where I felt really heard and understood. And so you know, I think there are instances that other children experience, you know, similar to that, you know, if we don't address, or we don't have, you know, the awareness that, hey, you know, this child might need a little bit more help, or, you know, it isn't just a minor thing, or, you know, you can't just say, oh, like it's just, you know, this person's an idiot, just disregard it, you know, but sometimes it does sit with you. And so this, to me, this gets to this concept of linked fate. And so when you think about, especially witnessing instances of racial violence, you know, there's studies that show that you know, the idea that what happens to an individual affects the group, you know, and so when you see these, you know, I know after the George Floyd video, a lot of my friends, especially my friends who had, you know, who were parents of children of color, really struggled after seeing that, you know, even before that, but, you know, there's this fear that, you know, even though you're not in that situation, or you don't know this person, that, you know, that you're, you know, that what happens to that individual, you know, does affect you as a group. And so a lot of, it's very easy to see, you know, if you are in community with people of color, you have family that are people of color. I know I had a friend from high school who had a biracial child, and it wasn't, you know, I remember her telling me, Ashley, like, I really didn't get it, you know, until it was my own child. Like, I really didn't get, you know, I really didn't appreciate what your experience might be like. And so I think that sometimes watching these videos or seeing these instances on TV, or, you know, I know from my work that there, you know, a lot of, you know, there's a lot of policing that happens in our schools. There's a lot of arrests that happen in our schools. And so sometimes this is, you know, seeing your classmates, you know, get handcuffed and arrested and brought out of school. So this idea that, you know, it's easy to see kind of the, you know, or think that might happen to me. I think some people watch videos like that and think, you know, they can look at it and think, oh, that's horrible. You know, nobody should have to go that. You empathize with that, but you don't really internalize it and think that's something that could happen to me. You know, I know in talking with my mom and my grandma, they're, you know, they would say this is absolutely horrible, but it doesn't really get to the level where they think, I don't think they really believe that the police would ever treat them that way. That is something that happens to, you know, unfortunately happens to people of color, or, you know, people that live in certain neighborhoods, but they don't really, you know, have that same connection or feeling that, you know, our paths in life are linked the way I think people in minority groups do. The other issue that I think comes from, you know, this exposure to these traumatic experiences, like I said, whether it's something you experience physically, you know somebody, you saw something, there's this concept of stereotypes threat. And this is where I think we see, you know, where the trauma interacts with the justice system. And so stereotype threat is this concept where if you're in a situation where you perceive that you might be stereotyped. And so, you know, I think an easy example, and one I'll show you a video about in a minute, is these, you know, the stereotype of Black criminality. That, you know, if you are a person of color and you have an interaction with a law enforcement officer, you know, if you are aware that, you know, I don't know this officer, this might be somebody I haven't met before, or it could be a teacher or school resource officer or something, that where you fear that this might be a situation where this person is going to stereotype you. And so I know friends who, you know, when they go out, like they dress up, you know, because, you know, I have a friend who has, you know, who's dark-skinned Black man with locks, and he's like, you know, I don't like to go out shopping or public places like in a hoodie because people treat me different, you know. So there's this fear that you might be stereotyped, and so we overcompensate for that. And so you know, when you feel you're in a situation where you feel you might be stereotyped, it activates that stress response cycle. And so you know, the types of reactions we would normally see when someone is experiencing trauma, you know, increased anxiety, I'll go to the next slide, but you know, increased arousal, more self-consciousness, your blood pressure goes up, you have increased levels of cortisol that get released into your system. So it's really your, you know, kind of your fight or flight, you know, alarms will start going off in these situations. And so even if you're not doing anything, because of that sort of historical trauma, you know, your stress response, you know, system can activate. And unfortunately, a lot of the behaviors associated with that activated stress response are also behaviors that I think sometimes law enforcement are trained to view as suspicious behaviors. And so, you know, you think if you've seen children that, you know, when they're stressed out, you know, it's your body's attempt to regulate yourself. You know, you might see fidgeting, you might see rocking, you know, you might see, you know, their heart's racing, they appear nervous, you know, they might sweat a little bit. And so a lot of these cues that come from our stress response being activated are also the same kind of cues that, you know, I've heard over the years, you know, law enforcement or, you know, school officials or teachers and stuff say that, you know, this is, you know, this person was acting suspicious, you know, they were doing things that make uncomfortable, you know, they were being evasive or, you know, some of that language that we see that, you know, like because I think that the association can sometimes be, you know, we see it on movies and stuff all the time, you know, that you're acting nervous, or, you know, it must be because you have something to hide, you know, it must be because you're guilty of something. And so, you know, I think, you know, what I'm hoping comes of this is that sometimes I think, and research shows that, you know, we also need to start considering that these same types of behaviors can also be a trauma response to the experiences that children of color have, unfortunately. So there is a video that I think for those of you who attended the Racial Trauma Summit, Professor Chris Henning did a presentation at that summit. And she's a professor at the Georgetown Juvenile Justice Clinic. She does a lot of work with the Galt Center. I'm going to attempt to play a short clip of a presentation that she did in a video that kind of articulates how these kind of even in a interaction that there's nothing, you know, physically harmful happening, the kind of psychological effects that might be at play. So let me see if I can get this to work. Okay.
An encounter that a police officer does not perceive to be in any way hostile becomes terrifying for a young child. So we're going to play a video of a police stop of a teenager in Louisville, Kentucky. All right. And I'm going to tell you now, for those of you who are watching, for me, this is one of the most painful videos to watch. It's not physical violence. It is very much a psychological encounter. I'm telling you now. So we're going to play a couple of minutes at the beginning of the encounter, and then we're going to skip ahead and play you just a minute or two at the back end. And let's just look at how this encounter is, has a psychological impact on the young person. And I invite you in the chat to write your reactions, type in your reactions as you're watching. All right. And so our wonderful Amy from the Galt Center will play that video for us.
It's gonna fall out when you get out of the vehicle.
Why are you taking me out the vehicle?
I'll move it up here for you.
Mama, they taking me out the vehicle.
Don't hop out?
They telling me to get out the car now.
And that's the reason why I didn't want anything on you. I don't want to break your phone, brother. You don't have any weapons on you, do you?
I don't.
No drugs?
Nope.
Awesome, man. Well, turn around, put your hands on the car for me. Switch feet.
I don't. I even did anything. Why are you checking me for?
I didn't say you did anything. So you don't have any.
Why'd you take me out the car?
Do you have any drugs, weapons on you?
I don't. I told you that
you
when
mind
you
if I
asked me
check?
the first time. I do mind.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm gonna make sure you don't have any weapons, okay?
No.
Yeah, we're allowed to pat you down for weapons.
Mama, they pat me down.
Yeah, we're allowed to do that. Quit doing the clenching your fist thing, too.
Dude, that's some bullshit.
What's bullcrap?
The only day I got off, I just want to go home. You close my door?
No.
Why?
I can't leave you to go close the door.
Okay.
Quit with the attitude. He's not giving you an attitude, and I'm not giving you an attitude.
I understand.
We deal with violent crime all day, every day. We're going to stop 30 more people after you. As soon as we get down here, you'll go home, okay? If you're wasting our time and we're wasting your time, I'm sorry for the small inconvenience. We're allowed to get people out of the car. Your heart is beating through your chest when you're on the phone with your mama and you're narrating to your mom, well, Mom, I stopped by the police. This is where I'm at. They're getting me out of the car. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
When you do all that, it's the same thing that people do when they're trying to hide something from the police and they're trying to take the situation off of it. Just like you're looking back at my partner over and over and over again, like you're waiting for him to see something or for him to do something wrong. It's 2018, young man. We all wear body cameras. It's recording all of it. It records your audio, my audio. It records all that. So guess what happens? If there was something in that vehicle and we go to trial over it, guess what? The jury your attitude. We're here for you, man. There's a shooting every day. It's crazy. It's sad. It's ridiculous. Ain't nobody been nasty to you at all.
Canine indication at 1810. Yeah.
Asking, why do you have like this negative view towards the police? What's the deal? What's ever happened in your life personally where you're like, you can give me a good explanation?
Absolutely nothing.
Really?
Fucking graduated. I got a good ass job.
Right.
I graduated with 3 4 band scholarships. I ain't never did shit in my life. I've been in the house all day.
So what's the problem? Like why are we in this situation?
You?
Huh?
What you mean?
We didn't do it.
You pulled me over?
We made a traffic stop for your violation that you did.
All right, man. I don't want to talk.
And then you went up here with it. Huh? You did the entire time. We don't know who you are. I don't know that you graduated and you got several scholarships and that you have a good job. I mean, I don't know. It's not like I have a x-ray vision that says, oh, this is who's in this car. He's good to go. If you don't want to hear it, that's fine. You can continue with your negative view towards me, I guess. I just figured I'd try to understand it, but that's fine. Huh? I'll never understand? Well, I don't hold no hard feelings against you. I don't take it personal though, buddy. If I take you out of these handcuffs while he's finishing up, are you gonna fight me or run or anything like that? Because initially when we brought you to the back of the car, you're clenching up your fists like you're gonna fight or punch or run or whatever. And you've been doing this pacing back and forth thing the entire time. I'll go ahead and take you out of cuffs, but I don't want you to like take off running to your car or fight me. Is that cool? I know you're mad. It is what it is, but I'll take you out of them since they're a little uncomfortable. Is that cool? Huh?
You're gonna take me out of them, man.
Is it cool? You gonna be chill?
Yeah, I'm gonna be chill.
All right.
All right, sir, here's your ID back. All right, you've got court October 2nd for improper turning at 7 p.m. 600 West Jeff. Do you understand the reason why you stopped? All righty, have a wonderful day.
So,
All right, so this is, I think probably an extreme example of, kind of these concepts of stereotype threat, experiencing race-based trauma, basically. And so I think that, if you were able to hear in the video, the officer described, he says, I'm sorry for this small inconvenience, and so the idea is that this event, this isn't a small inconvenience, this is in this case, this is a 18-year-old, recent high school graduate who, had no criminal history, and the reason for the stop, I believe, was they said he turned too wide, it was a wide turn. And so, you see this, clearly, I'm like, you have one child, there's all these officers, you see people in the community, on the street witnessing this. And so I think that it's, I think that the idea that these stops, that might occur are just a small inconvenience. I think we really need to start rethinking, how that that these, it's not a small inconvenience. These can be significant traumatic events in the lives of Black and brown children. This just to give you a little more context, this there ended up being a lawsuit, and they did I think win a suit against the Louisville Police Department, or at least a judge ruled that there wasn't, there was no basis for the stop or a legal basis to really engage in that type of behavior. But you see the, for those of you watching that might have seen, how the description of he's pacing, he's clenching his hands, he's looking away, he wants to call his mom. These are things of, to me, I look at this and I think, these are clearly signs of that this child is experiencing a traumatic stress. The cop says your heart's racing out of your, I can see your heart racing out of your chest, and this is, like I said, but to them, this is suspicious behavior. And I'm certainly not, suggesting that all police encounters are like this, or all officers are like this officer, or that, this is happening rampantly in our community. But I think that it does, sometimes this does happen. And really, what I hope you take away from that video is, considering that incident from the experience of that child, and how the actions of those officers, would have an impact on that child. And so to kind of shift a little bit, so I hope that kind of understands some of the concepts. These are, you could spend hours talking about some of these issues, but just to kind of understand how, when I talk about, race-based trauma and traumatic stress, this is these are the reasons why I think we need to, when we talk about providing trauma-informed care, to youth in our community, we have to consider that there is a racial component to a lot of these interactions. So then just to kind of give you, I talked about this at the summit, you know, kind of where things are at and how we might consider some of these instances here in our community. Let me see if I can get back to my slideshow. And I would say that that full presentation, that video clip that I showed you, you know, we watched just a few minutes of it. That full presentation is available for free on YouTube. I think it's about a, you know, a 2-hour-long panel discussion about a lot of these topics. So just so, I think my slides cut off a little bit, but so when we talk about a lot of my work with the, let me see. Okay, I'll try to explain this to you. I'm not sure why my screen isn't showing the whole picture, but so when we look at, you know, kind of racial disproportionality in our Rock County youth justice system, I would say that we have, in terms of the, you know, our youth justice team, you know, there's a great team in place here in Rock County that is really informed and interested in addressing these issues of disproportionality in our youth justice system. Years ago, I think Rock County had gotten a MacArthur grant, and so they've been instituting the use of like risk assessment tools and stuff to try to reduce you know, using those tools to help inform their decisions. So, you know, some of the decisions we make in terms of arrest and when to hold children in detention, things like that, are, you know, we're using research tools to try to eliminate some of the, you know, bias that might play into our decisions. So if we look at, you know, the first graph is just, and these are 2020 and 2021 numbers. So the first slide talks about the you know, what the population of, you know, the youth is. So in Rock County, you know, there's only about 9% of our youth population are Black. And so when we look at arrests, the middle graph, even though Black youth make up only about 9% of, you know, 9-10% of the population in the county, they make up almost 40% of the arrests. And so, you know, with the white being the second highest, so about 60% of the arrests are white youth, 40% Black youth. That goes, the last slide goes to disorderly conduct arrests. And so that's kind of a lot of the, we focus on disorderly conduct because it's one of those kind of subjective crimes. So for disorderly conduct is says that you know, basically engage in some type of behavior, could be violent, boisterous, unreasonably loud, or otherwise disorderly conduct, and that your conduct under the circumstances tended to cause or provoke a disturbance. And so it's sort of, you know, that's one of those crimes that can be in the eye of the beholder, whether you perceive someone's actions as causing a disturbance or being overly loud or aggressive. It's also an area where sometimes we, I think, are at most risk of implicit bias, kind of factoring into those decisions and how we view the behavior. And so for disorderly conduct, the part you can't see is that the makeup of arrest, the disproportionality for disorderly conduct offenses, it goes to, it's almost 50-50. And so almost 49.7% of the disorderly conduct arrests are among Black youth, where only 46% of those arrests are for white youth. And so again, this is, even though they make up 9% of the, you know, 9-10% of the population, almost 50% of the disorderly conduct arrests are for Black youth. And so again, this is sort of, I just want to get us thinking about, how trauma, and particularly racial trauma, might factor into some of those contexts in terms of the behavior and what we perceive as being suspicious or aggressive. You could see on the that video that a lot of the the behaviors of the children, that moving the hands, looking around, like it was clear that the officers were perceiving that as some type of threat, when I don't think that that was the intent of the child. I think it was, likely just a response to the trauma. Again, I think that's articulated more in this slide. Again, I'm not sure why my screen's cut off, but when you see about, the types of arrests that we see frequently for youth in Rock County, disorderly conduct is really the biggest chunk of behavior that we see with adolescents. And again, this could be insubordination at school, talking back. It's again, one of those subjective things. But then I'll go to, in terms of where these instances happen. So we look at, where are these arrests taking place? The biggest chunk is, in the community. The green is school, and then the other, the light blue is at home. So when we think of, where kids are at when they're having contact, in the community and at school is, 3/4 of the arrests. And so, to me, I think that can affect, in terms of, how we, there's a lot of factors that can play into that, but that's sort of where we're seeing things in Rock County. Let me go to my other screen so I can show you data. So again, this slide talks about the, again, where these arrests are happening. So the other slide, the previous slide was, for all youth in general. So this kind of breaks it down by race. And so for the community, the highest rate of these police contacts, highest rates of arrests are for in those community-based arrests. Or we saw that was a section on the previous pie chart. 72% of those community-based arrests are for Black youth. And so when we think of so this is police having contact with children, either on the street or walking down the street, at the grocery store or something, might be, neighbors calling in suspicious behavior that they see. So, you see this higher rate of arrests for Black youth in the community. The middle slide is home. So only 28% of arrests for Black youth occur in the home, so that we see this big reduction, and when I see that, I think too of again how these instances of historical trauma can play into effect, where you might have a situation, these numbers might reflect the reluctance of Black families to contact law enforcement if there's a problem. So we see there's much higher rates of instances of arrests in the home for white youth, so I think I don't think it's a huge stretch to see that there's a, some of the, these videos, these historical incidents, I think you see a reluctance, I think, or a fear of safety that, contacting police might make the situation worse. In the school setting, I think that's the last part you can't see, but school is a little more equal. Of the school-based arrests, about 46.8% are white youth, with about 40% being of Black youth. And again, this is going back to that that first slide, that again, when we look at these numbers, 87% of our youth are white, with only about 10% being children of color. And so I say all this to say that to commend our juvenile justice system is that overall we've seen a huge reduction in the overall number of arrests. I think there's a lot more people utilizing these evidence-based practices, these tools to help guide our decisions. So we have less bias in our decision making. So overall we've seen a huge reduction in the number, but we haven't seen much change in this disproportionality. And so I think that's kind of the part we need to work on, is getting to the cause of this disproportionality. So even though the overall numbers are down, we're still seeing this disproportionate arrest rates between youth of color and white youth. And so, in my perspective, I think that this, learning more about the impacts of race-based trauma and how our, youth of color might respond to law enforcement or, other instances where they might feel like they're stereotyped and things like that, I think that knowing more about race-based trauma and how that affects kids can really help our understanding and maybe guide us to make better decisions or recognize then when we're seeing behavior that might be a trauma response versus behavior that actually is suspicious or driven by some sort of criminality. So I want to leave you with just a couple things I've mentioned. So in terms of resources, so Chris Henning, who was in that clip we saw, she wrote a book, The Rage of Innocence, How America Criminalizes Black Youth. There's a specific chapter, chapter 9 in that book focuses on kind of the policing as trauma. She tells a story about a client she represented. In the book, his name is Kevin, but by age 17, again, this is in the DC area, he had been stopped by police 50 times by age 17. And kind of through her work with him, he was really kind of exhibiting post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, hypervigilance, paranoia, kind of really emotional dysregulation. And so she kind of tells that story and how, and kind of his path through the criminal justice system. What Happened to You, I think, is another great resource for people that are interested in learning more about adolescent trauma. It's not, race specific, but there's, I think, tons of good information that really talks about some of those biological effects of when our stress response gets activated. Because another big issue when we have like this influx of cortisol and adrenaline and our heart races and stuff, when that stress response is activated, parts of your brain kind of shuts down to the essentials. And so, your frontal cortex that does, involves your higher level thinking, decision making, you have limited access to that area of your brain when you're in this heightened state of arousal. And so when we think of, I see a lot of times in court, frequently, kids who saw, see the police and run. And then you ask them, why did you run? You didn't, sometimes like you didn't even do anything, but now you've got a charge for fleeing or something. And it's like, it's like, I wasn't thinking, my stress response got activated. I was in that fight and flight mode. And, really, I think children to begin with have difficulty appreciating, the long-term consequences of their actions, and they already struggle with impulsivity. So this is kind of another layer on top of that. Again, that video clip I showed you is from the Galt Center. The Galt Center has a YouTube page. They do a lot of, that's where you can find that video that I showed of that section of the presentation that Professor Henning did. There's a bunch of different resources. A lot of their programs are recorded. And so there's a lot of different panel discussions, presentations that they do. So that's a great place to also look if you want more information about some of these subjects we talked about today. So that's it for me. If there's any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Judge Morse. I'm gonna feed you some questions. We've got a couple that we had from before that we thought of. The first one, and I haven't seen any in the chat. I know people are, saying, oh my gosh, the video was pretty disturbing. With HIPAA, this is one that wasn't off of that. With HIPAA and other privacy laws and practices working with youth, are trauma-informed assessments and safety plans easily accessed by multiple providers so they don't have to like write them all over again? I mean, keep filling out forms and all that to avoid duplication. Want me to repeat it or you got it?
Maybe if you could repeat it. Sure. For me.
Yeah. Well, with the HIPAA, and all these things working with youth, are trauma-informed assessments and safety plans easily accessed by multiple providers?
Well, I would say that so HIPAA really refers to, doctors or hospitals' ability to release your public, your medical information. And so, the HIPAA covers, like whether that information is made public. And so, that's sort of on an individual basis, whether people want to, you can share your own health information. There's nothing prohibiting you from doing that. I would say what I've learned from, because I'm not somebody who works in the medical field, and there might be people on this call who have more experience in that than I do. But what it's been reported by some of the individuals who participate in the trauma task force is that that there really has been the same kind of lack of awareness that I had for a long time about some of these issues. It's the same in the medical profession, the psychology field. In Rock County, we have very few mental health providers that are people of color. And so, what I've seen and through my work with the trauma task force is that, there's they're identifying a need, saying we need more training in this area. And I think there's a lot of people that want more training in this area. Like I said, from the people that are part of the trauma task force that work in the mental health field, we have people that are counselors, work in child welfare, nurses, who do exams, sane nurses and stuff. And so a lot of people are asking for more information on this topic. And so I think generally this is an area where more training is needed kind of across the board.
Okay. I guess it's kind of the same. I'm not sure if maybe you've kind of already answered this. What training is provided to judges to understand this whole concept of trauma, of BIPOC youth especially, so they are knowledgeable about youth in court?
I would say I've only, I've been a judge for less than a year now, but there's in terms of like mandatory training, there is none. There's none. There's no training on this that I'm required to take as a judge. A lot of the the training focuses more on more general issues, but I think my experiences has been, there's certainly nothing that's required of us. And so it's really kind of on the individual, whether or not, you seek out this information. And so, you know, what I'm trying to do is just make people aware that this is out there, and hopefully, you know, they'll choose to learn more about these issues.
Well, I hope your fellow judges do. Um, How should community people approach youth they may be working with in order to better communicate with them?
I think that's a tough
Yeah,
question.
it is a
I
tough
think most
question.
of it is, and like I said, there may be people on this call who have ideas other than mine. So,
Sure.
you know, I always welcome conversations about these topics. I think sharing information is always helpful. But I think, you know, what we found is that the more people are aware of these issues, like, for example, in our jury system, you know, we do in trials, you know, we do some, judges do have the ability to do some instructions on, you know, educating jurors about, you know, implicit bias and how that might affect their decision making. And I think what we found is, just generally, when people are aware that, hey, this might be a bias I have, this might be an issue, people are a little more conscious of their actions and their words. And so I think a lot of it is just, you know, building those individual relationships. I think, as I mentioned before, you know, I think being in community with people of color really helps, you know, us have more thoughtful, conscientious conversations around some of these topics. So, and when I say in community, it's not just, you know, that you know, my neighbor is a person of color, or, you know, my coworker is really having the, you know, building those relationships, listening to people. And I think really, you know, we could all do a better job of listening, you know, before we make assumptions or judge people. And so, I would, you know, I always encourage everybody, you know, look around, you know, look at your group, you know, who's included, who's excluded. And really, I think just genuinely being in community with people and caring about the outcomes. You know, I think people can sense that, people know that, people can feel that when you're talking to them. So really, that's maybe not a good answer, but that's, you know, I think that does help.
Yeah, I'll jump to another audience one. Does police training include trauma-informed issues?
That's probably a better question for law enforcement.
Yeah.
I would say that I know, at least, you know, when we did the racial trauma summit last summer, you know, that was something that law enforcement was invited to. I know a number have participated in. You know, just in my conversations with people, I know that you know, on the youth racial disparities committee that I worked on, there's members of law enforcement on that subcommittee. And so I think, you know, in Rock County, there is definitely law enforcement participation on those groups, which I think is great.
Yeah. Do you feel that you haven't, I'll go back to this other one in a minute. Do you feel you have enough options for treatment rather than punishment for young people that come in front of you?
I think overall in the justice system, really in all areas, I think most people would say, you know, having more treatment options is needed. I think for both youth and adults, I think we're really seeing, and I don't know if there's higher instances or more awareness or people talking about it, but I think we've really seen an increase in people, both youth and adults, that are struggling with their mental health. You know, I don't know if it's post-pandemic or just, you know, kind of the access to things on the internet, you know, viewing those videos and kind of the vicarious trauma. I think people are more connected with what's happening in the world, good or bad. And that I think does play an impact on mental health. And I think any judge you ask would tell you that there's definitely a need would love to have more options in terms of treatment and services. We see a lot of, like I said, even connecting youth with, counselors, mental health providers that are themselves people of color is something that's missing. Having really just more options. I think that we see people that are have long wait lists to get into treatment providers, wait lists to get into substance abuse counseling, wait lists for housing. These are all issues I think that can impact people or lead people into the criminal justice system. So I think a lot of people would like to see more options in terms of kind of the I think, in the medical field, they tell you focus on preventative care, do your annual things, preventative care. And so I think really that, that same philosophy, preventative care can go a long way in our justice system as well.
Let's see, somebody asked about what kind of, is there something that all parents should be telling teenagers about how to conduct themselves in a traffic stop? I mean, to me, it seemed like he did what he was supposed to do, but that would not escalate any situation.
I think it's like I said, I think educating people on the impacts of racial trauma, educating law enforcement on the impacts of racial trauma, and understanding that this might be an issue with the in terms of their interactions. I think education really goes a long way. Tell me the question again. I'm getting off track.
She just wanted to know if there was something that every parent should tell, whatever color they were.
Yeah, and I don't have a good answer to that. I think there are I think it's an individual, nobody knows their kids better than their parents. And so I think it's really, an individual assessment that you would do. I know there's some, I've heard, some people, if you're a person of color, you have, some of you might have heard of, having the talk, having the talk with your kids. And so I think there's, on the one hand, it's like you're doing your best to protect your child, so that they are safe, that they're, they come home at the end of the day. I think that there's value in that. I've heard also, sometimes people say, well, does that increase the fear, does that increase the concern that, I don't know that we want to necessarily create a fear in situations where it's not necessary, but I think there's, I think there's probably more than just one thing that needs to happen in terms of, preventing, these encounters from becoming a traumatic experience. I think that it's really probably, addressing things. To me, I think that I tend to be more, we need to do a better job educating, law enforcement and people that are enforcing these laws, because otherwise it seems, my just impression is that you're sort of putting the responsibility on the victim of the, kind of oppressive to solve the problem. And I think that's a lot of responsibility and pressure that we're putting on children, that it's up to the children to, who don't, who are, these are kids. And so to, expect that a child to be sophisticated enough to, kind of navigate those situations, sometimes that's a really big ask.
Yeah. I guess we're kind of out of time. There's another couple of questions here, but we so appreciate, is there one last thing you want us to remember?
I would, like I said, I think that the big, my big thing is just, I just want people to understand and be mindful of that, even if you haven't had, an experience, everybody's kind of experiences are valid. And I think we really need to just be more curious and open-minded that, your path through the world might look different and feel different than someone else's. And I think that certainly the impacts of, these trauma, it's not exclusive to, just people of color. It's, this is something that impacts everybody. And I think that's something that really resonated. I think if going back to George Floyd, there are in other videos where you see people that, call out to their mom, and I think that is something that, people, any mother, I think felt that in a different way, maybe. And so, I might not be a person of color, but as a, somebody, like if you're a mother, that hit, it hits different. And so I think it's just, we have, as humans, we have so many things in common. And so, when you see those, think about the commonality that you might have, whether it's, you're a mother, you have a son, there are all sort of things that we do have in common, that I hope, that we can draw on to try to better understand each other.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Judge Morse, for giving us so much to think about and for challenging us to find ways to engage with our communities and to better understand trauma-informed care and maybe work on seeing whether our police departments do a lot of training with this. And we all need youth to feel understood and to listen to, and we thank you again for sharing your knowledge. And I'd like at this time to acknowledge our voter service chairs who are out in the community offering information to voters and potential voters. Betty Carr and Barb Porter of Beloit and Lisa Johnson of Janesville. They need your help. So if you can volunteer some time in the coming months, they will definitely appreciate that, whether that's working at a table at a registration event or helping register our youngest, newest voters at the high school level. Although we would love to have you all become members of the League of Women Voters, you do not need to be a League member to help us as long as you are willing to abide by the League's nonpartisan policy. And we want to remind everybody about the primary election on Tuesday, February 21, and that's on the state Supreme Court election. You can hear candidate interviews on Wisconsin Eye, and then there's the League Vote 411 has the 3 at least of the candidates' comments, information about them. Both leagues will conduct candidate forums in March before the spring election on Tuesday, April 4th. And be sure to check our websites and the Wisconsin League of Women Voters and Facebook websites for information about upcoming events. And so Linda, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you,
and
Susan.
thank you again, Judge.
Thank you, Judge Morse. As a social psychologist, I really appreciate that the concept of stereotype threat is getting outside of the academy. So thank you. Once again, we want to encourage voters to go to vote411.org for the League's Voters Guide for the spring elections. Information about the candidates running for the Wisconsin Supreme Court primary election is on the website now. Information about the candidates running for the in the April 4th general election will be posted on or about March 13th, including information on the candidates running in local elections such as Janesville City Council and Janesville School Board. Our Janesville City Council candidate forum will be held live and in person on Wednesday, March 8th at 6:00 p.m. in the Janesville City Hall Council chambers. The forum will be broadcast and recorded for later viewing by JATV. We will host our 3rd annual Earth Week Forum on Thursday, April 20th at 6:30 p.m. The theme for this year's virtual forum is community sustainability. You'll be able to find out about these and more events on our League's websites and Facebook pages. The recording of this program will be made available later today, so you can share it, access to it with your friends who weren't able to attend today, because I think Judge Morris's message is one that is of interest to many people outside of the group of people who were here today. So we want to thank you all for joining us today in this tradition that brings our two leagues of Janesville and Beloit together, and we hope that you will be able to join us again next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.